Joining Carl today is guest host Alayna Sullivan, Senior Director of Corporate Communications and Brand Marketing at Olo, where they discuss the astonishing multi-billion-dollar acquisitions of Deliveroo and SevenRooms by DoorDash, the projections for the industry shared at Food on Demand, and Wonder's mega raise of $600 million. That's all ahead on this week's Digital Restaurant.
Happy Monday. We are back here at the Digital Restaurant, and I have a new friend joining me. Alayna is the Senior Director of Corporate Comms over at Olo. Alayna, how are you? Lovely to have you with me.
I am so excited to be here. Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I was glad to spend some time together last week at Food on Demand. Did you enjoy the show? You were there the whole time, I believe.
I was there the whole time. I loved it. I think Jared, Bernadette, that whole team, they do a fantastic job putting on a show that you learn a lot. It's intimate. You make a lot of connections. I had a great time.
I didn't realize that Olo was one of the first groups to back Food on Demand. So you guys have been there throughout.
Yeah. Jared likes to tell the story that Noah was there at a little bitty fold out table, hawking Olo himself way back in the day. So we've been an early supporter and very proud to be a continued supporter and do really cool things with them.
That's awesome. Well, we better get on. There's been a few things in the news in the last few days, right? I guess we should cover them. I'm glad that we timed this perfectly because there's a lot of news at the moment around maybe potential sales of Olo, but you had to do earnings releases last week as well, not just the whole thing around the Food on Demand. And I believe there was something else that perhaps didn't get picked up in the headlines, but it's pretty exciting for you guys.
Yeah, there's some other headlines that maybe got a little more coverage earlier in the week, but late breaking on our earnings call, we announced that Olo is moving forward with a Catering Plus pilot with Chipotle. So Chipotle was an early Olo customer a long time ago and famously has an incredible homegrown system that they have developed over the years. And they have an amazing catering product, but they've really just done light touch work around it on top of their normal mealtime channel. And now they're going to partner with Olo to really accelerate some of those interesting features like house accounts, tax exemption, things that are really important for repeat catering business as the catering opportunity grows. That gives them a little bit of speed to value. It's going to be a pilot in one regional location and hopefully grow from there. But I mean, you mentioned it up top. We were both at Food on Demand. There's so much buzz around catering right now and the opportunity that it presents for restaurants. The average mealtime, I think it's 10 times the average mealtime ticket, around a $350 average order value. That's just nuts kind of stuff. It's a huge opportunity when we're all looking at a potential recession. How do you drive increased traffic, profitable traffic? Those orders tend to be super profitable. So really excited to have Chipotle join us and do this Catering Plus pilot, and really interesting to watch the digital space as it relates to catering as we move forward.
I think there's so much opportunity when it comes to improving digital ordering interfaces when it comes to catering, right? I mean, clearly there's a lot of clear players out there that are doing some pretty exciting things, but the opportunity is huge. And I think, yes, we've seen a recovery of catering. It went through a pretty dark time during those pandemic years, but now is really a point, I think, where businesses that are clearly struggling when it comes to that day-to-day transactions are now looking to the catering channel as being something that, look, this could keep us going and actually open up doors to new brand awareness to customers that perhaps hadn't heard of companies like Chipotle, which isn't a good example because everyone's heard of Chipotle, but
the tiny startup brand,
a small little brand out in Newport Beach, yeah. But I think catering in general is something which we're going to see more and more improvements when it comes to digital interface. Is that how you guys see it at Olo?
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, there are a lot of players who have been in the catering space for a long time. We're seeing a trend where we're seeing this cross the board, want to own the guest experience, because as we're moving into this era of AI, the more you know about your guests, the better you can retarget them in the future. And so collecting guest data is such a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. I got someone shoved a microphone in my face at Food on Demand and says, Carl, what's the most important thing when it comes to catering? Is it speed, accuracy, quality? And I said, it's a trick question. It's all three, right? It's so important.
I think when you think of how important those three things are just for a normal mealtime order, those are incredibly important. Then you have that average order value of $350. That amps the importance so much. That guest is spending so much money with you. You better get it right. All right. And another company who just had a few headlines this past week, DoorDash, just a little chump change in their pocket, picked up two massive players in our space this past week. What do you think it means for the industry moving forward? That's a pretty big landscape shift.
I think they sent a very clear signal to the global food and hospitality industry saying, look, we're no longer just a food delivery platform. And with the acquisition of Deliveroo for 3.9 billion and SevenRooms for 1.2 billion, I think are the numbers I saw, DoorDash is accelerating its evolution into something much bigger, right? It's talking about this vertically integrated platform that I think touches every part of the dining experience. And it brings me back to a chapter of our first book where we talked about Meituan being that super app of the East. And this maybe is their view of being the Meituan in the West, right? So let's talk through them in turn. Deliveroo, founded in 2013, operates in 9 countries, including the UK, Ireland, France, Italy, Belgium, Singapore, some in the Middle East like the UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar. And as of its last financial report, it says it has about 176,000 restaurant partners and 7 million monthly active consumers, and something like 135,000 delivery riders. It's a big deal, right? Now, most of that, 60%, comes from the UK and Ireland, and it's a real dominant force where the duopoly between them and Just Eat really stand out. But I think really what this does is it instantly adds deep local operational expertise, a loyal consumer base, and obviously continues to broaden out their European and, of course, now Middle Eastern footprint. They've got Wolt over more in Eastern Europe, and now this is really taking a role to play across the entire continent there. Now, pair that with SevenRooms and the acquisition there, you start to see the full chessboard emerging, because SevenRooms is a hospitality CRM and guest experience platform that's used by 13,000 venues across 100 or so countries, includes top tier names like Wolfgang Puck, Mandarin Oriental, MGM Resorts. And a lot of folks just think of them as a reservation platform, right? But actually it's got a whole range of different services: waitlist and table management, marketing automation, guest profiles, loyalty programs, feedback tools. There's a whole range of different things that I think DoorDash are getting beyond just reservations. And in that sense, I think SevenRooms is helping restaurants own the guest relationship, something that has been perhaps eroded by delivery intermediaries over the past decade. So DoorDash, I think, is betting that the next wave of restaurant tech will be about owning not just the delivery moment, but just the entire guest journey, both online and off premise. And that's where this kind of comparison comes back to Meituan, the Chinese tech giant that blends food delivery with reservations, grocery, lifestyle services, movie theater bookings, all in one platform. And so if DoorDash's move here starts to feel a bit like that, it's really going to give them that stickiness to get the consumers to continue to use their platform. Interesting to see that Amazon bow out of this race. They held a 15% stake in Deliveroo and previously bundling it with Prime memberships. Of course, with the Just Eat situation with Grubhub, also, they were a player there as well. So it's interesting that Amazon declined to make a competitive bid into this one. So what does that mean for that company in the future? Not sure. And one last thing, Alayna, before to get your take. Uber also were in the news, right? So they didn't have as much. They had 700 million, and they acquired Turkey's Trendyol Go, I think it's called. And that obviously has given them access to the Turkish market and 90,000 restaurants and 19,000 couriers in that particular space. A lot's been happening. How are you keeping up with it all?
We're talking about the biggest players in this space spending a ton of money on very strategic moves. To your point, it's not just the geography. You now have people who know the logistics of the area. They already have the data points. You're going to be able to pull those in, learn their best practices to improve your core business. So super duper interesting. I think the SevenRoom things is even more fascinating because we're in an age of convenience. I think from a convenience perspective, it's a super interesting play for guests. It's also a scary play for restaurants where if there isn't the guest data sharing piece that SevenRooms is known for, giving the restaurants owning their guests, and now that capability all lives within the DoorDash third-party app, that gets interesting for restaurants, or they gonna just lose out on another touch point.
Yeah, really good point. We were hearing from Uber and the way in which they're trying to combine the insights from the rides business, and how if someone takes an Uber to a new restaurant for an on-premise occasion, that data point is really powerful, perhaps to ping that customer a week or two down the line about an off-premise experience. DoorDash don't have a rides business in that sense. So with the reservation angle, that gives them that same place to compete in that way. All right, up next, Huddle House. I haven't talked about them much, but they were in the news talking about how they're re-engineering their business to really optimize for off-premise, which is perhaps a channel that they haven't necessarily done in the past. What are the key takeaways on this article for you?
Yeah, I thought it's really interesting. Legacy brand, definitely not one you might think of for off-premise or being digitally forward, but they announced this week they're introducing 3 new prototype design. One is a small town classic. It's going to maintain that welcoming old school feeling, trying to attract younger generations with that model. But then the other 2 are where the digital part comes in. So you've got this urban QSR conversion model that's going to have drive-through lanes, increased throughput, focus on speed, convenience, and urban markets. And then the micro footprint is really just anywhere from 500 to 1,200 square feet, really small, no dining rooms, airports, colleges, travel centers, that quick in and out. And all of these are optimized to have people enjoy Huddle House off premise. I think with casual dining struggling nationwide a little bit, we all just saw this earnings cycle come out, traffic is down. How can we increase dining opportunities? How can we position our brand as not just a sit down and eat here, but eat in your car, eat at home? I think this is a really strategic move for Huddle House to put themselves in a different position. And typically breakfast food travels really well. It's good mobile food. So I'm excited to see how this works out for them. I think it's a blueprint for aging brands to take a look at how they can increase dining opportunities and frequency.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most important thing here is to recognize where change is needed. And by investing in this approach and being able to move forward in that direction, you've got to hope it's going to, for some, introduce the brand to customers that perhaps haven't heard about it, which is great because then that can lead to more on-prem occasions in the future. But then also it gives that convenience angle for those folks that perhaps don't want to leave the comforts of their home. But the leadership over there have really got their finger on the pulse, and they're certainly making some changes, and I'm excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah, I love to see it. And they're taking cues. I mean, we've seen some of the big players in the space over the past year introduce some very unique, futuristic, different designs and footprints to increase traffic and really focus on that off-premise model. Like the Taco Bell Defy comes to mind, and Shake Shack rolling out drive-thrus. I think they said this week they're going to test combo meals in drive-thrus to increase throughput. All of those things are just trying to tap into this more digital consumer, this more, I want it now. I'm not as tied to sitting down in a certain place, eating in my car, taking it home feels very natural to a lot of younger generations. A lot of that fueled by marketplace. They're used to eating meals delivered. Create an experience where they can come pick it up directly from you. Got to be a good thing. All right. So we've both mentioned we were at Food on Demand this week, had a great time. But there was a presentation that gave us a little bit of a less than rosy picture for how the industry might be moving given the macro trends. So what did you learn from that presentation, and what does everyone need to know, keep an eye on?
Well, first of all, why do I get to have to say all the bad news? I guess you've just got such a positive, like sprightly, outgoing character. I'll give the downbeat news article. It's all right, Elaine, I've got it. Look, I think the industry, if it didn't know already, is bracing itself for a challenging year. Victor Fernandez is the Chief Insights Officer at Black Box Intelligence, and he was bringing up a whole range of things around declining consumer sentiment, the effects of inflation and the expectations around that, and just the general concerns over jobs and prices, and how that's really created a less favorable outlook. And he said himself, it's not going to be the strongest year for restaurants. So things have become even more pessimistic, and folks are starting to use the word recession. Black Box projects a decline in comparable traffic ranging from 2.5% to 4.2%, with a midpoint of a 3.3% decrease. And so comparable sales are expected to fluctuate between a 0.7 increase and a 0.7 decline, suggesting a relatively flat year ahead. And that really continues the trend from last year where traffic declined by 2.8%. So Fernandez really attributed these challenges to an oversupply of restaurants, which has outpaced population in 39 of the states over the past 5 years. Funny that, it's the first time I've heard anyone update the information point that I've talked about a lot in the past, that pre the pandemic, the US was second only to Japan in restaurants per capita. I wonder what it is now with that level of growth in restaurants relative to population. Do we just have too many? And therefore, have we just oversaturated the amount of choice that folks have out there? The second thing he talked about was dining out has become less affordable. Over the last decade, restaurant prices have surged by 49%, right, compared to a 29% increase in grocery prices. And of course, wages have risen by 45% over that time. So a lot of pressure there. Consumer behavior obviously reflects in that. And he was joined by a good friend of mine, Lisa Miller, author of the Business of Joy book. And she does monthly surveys of 1,000 different respondents. And she does them around a whole range of different topics. She had this line, I don't know whether you remember it. She said, when joy is greater than fear, economic growth begins. And if fear is greater than joy, people don't spend, which really stood out to me. I think in response to those conditions, consumers are seeking value and consistency. I think we've heard that across the conference scene most of this year. And then Fernandez went on to talk about how people are just moderating their spending by perhaps skipping appetizers, drinks, or desserts. And in that sense, value really became a theme of the discussion. What is value? Black Box surveyed diners on factors that make an order worth it. And for full service restaurants, 58% cited price, no shocks, right, as the most significant factor, followed by attitude, taste, consistency, and portion size. Whereas in limited serve establishments, price was paramount for 50% of the respondents, with taste, attitude in the second and third category. But how this all kind of navigates down and impacts the technology space means you've got to have a really strong ROI argument if you're trying to encourage a restaurant group to invest in technology so that they can see that this is going to be able to help their number one challenge, which is transactions and obviously basket growth. What did you make of this? I'm sure you're seeing similar numbers across Olo.
Yeah, I think actually mentioned earnings was just the other day, and both Noah and Peter, our CFO, commented on this and said, this is nothing new. Olo's been around a minute. We watched the 2008, 2009 recession at Olo, and you're starting to see some similar trends. You see people trade down and not out. A quote that Noah loves to use is, people don't magically learn or learn to love to cook. So I do think that QSR and people that do have really value-driven price points are going to weather the storm a little bit better. But to your point, bringing it back to digital, what can you as a technology partner pitch or offer or continue to offer your restaurants to make the ROI worth it? Because tech's not getting any cheaper either. So what can you be doing with your tech stack, with your technology, to help these operators drive profitable traffic? I think is a really interesting thing to think about.
Absolutely. As you mentioned that there, I was thinking about some of the slides that they had shared, and I'll have to bring some of those up here.
Love a visual moment.
Yeah. So I took a few photos as Victor and Lisa were talking, and I thought these were interesting as well. First of all, look at the difference by different segments here. When you look at the difference between sales, where like at fast casual, for example, negative 0.9 is so different to traffic at negative 4.6. But also when you look at the family dining sector there, where comp traffic is down double digits along with fine dining, it shows you really this 2-year position of how it's been really difficult, both on sales, but also on the traffic side. I won't play the video in the interest of time, but what Victor was sharing here was clearly that is coming through in the zip codes, which have the lowest income, versus the restaurants in those kind of areas. And obviously those areas that have the highest income are actually seeing a little bit of modest growth, albeit again, the traffic is down, but they've been able to compensate it through sales and price, no doubt. One of Lisa's slides here was interesting as well, in the sense of reminding ourselves that when we're looking at numbers that reflect averages, it's important to break down the difference. So the not spending as much, 35%, still spending equivalent amount, 20%. But when you look at the difference between, like, say, mums and dads, you're seeing a real different story there in terms of the mums perhaps not spending so much, the Hispanics also not spending as much, and then the Gen Xers at the top of that group there. This one was interesting for me in terms of online reviews for the last 12 months, because each one of those there are seeing a drop in average star rating when it's mentioned for a delivery transaction. Speed, quality, food prep, and value, all down, and value naturally being the lowest one. The last one I thought to share here was this, which I've seen before. I don't know whether you've seen Lisa present this one before, but I think it's really pertinent, certainly for you guys over at Olo, but also across anyone that's trying to own the order experience. And what Lisa was trying to show here is when you look at the difference between the average across the US versus the Gen Z population, when someone's thinking about ordering for an off-premise occasion and they start with a brand in mind, 6 out of 10 typically are going to the restaurant website or app directly. That's a lower number when it comes to Gen Z. And then when someone's starting with a brand, they go to the third party and already know the restaurant 2 out of 10 times. So that's interesting for me that we're starting to see that if you have a brand in mind, if you've got that loyalty connection in mind with your consumer base, then more are heading directly to your own website or app, which I think is super, super encouraging. Naturally, when you're browsing for brands, then the marketplaces have a really good role to play there. If you don't really know what you want, they still have somewhere to go. But I think that's got an interesting number. So there we go. I feel like I've sprinkled a little bit of positivity on the end there.
I like it. I look to order first party whenever I can. I think it's really important, and I think we could get to the how do you compete with the convenience of third party. Having that seamless ordering experience gets increasingly important to make sure you're converting on your own channels.
All right, we'll finish up with, honestly, they're not sponsoring me, but I think we've featured them on the last 7 or 8.
I did a little research watching.
Yeah, they're always popping up, aren't they? I guess they've got a good PR team. But look, we have to talk about this one. 600 million raised for Wonder. They're in the news a lot. Jason Rusk was on stage at Food on Demand talking about their visions and appetite for growing more. I think they did 45 units, I think, in the last year. But with 600 million, I suspect they're going to be growing even faster and utilizing that Grubhub and seamless interface as best they can too.
Absolutely. So the Mark Lore Food Hall empire got that $600 million investment. It brings their total funding up to something like $2 billion. That's a $7 billion valuation, which is larger than the valuation of most publicly traded restaurants. We're talking massive numbers. And to your point, what we assume they're going to use that investment on is some rapid expansion. So they've communicated that they currently operate about 46 locations. They plan to double that over the next year or so to 90. That's more than one location a week. And these locations aren't a tiny storefront. These are massive operations with food halls, with 30 brands. It's this whole conglomerate under one roof. So we talked a little bit about that SuperApp and what that might look like. And is it DoorDash with these acquisitions, or is Wonder already coming in to assume this space with all of their different restaurant brand properties? Then they have Grubhub Seamless, they have Blue Apron, they have Tastemade. This integrated food empire. And I think what was super interesting about this round was it was full of a lot of repeat investors who had invested in those first rounds. So there's clearly a lot of belief and interest in people who are close to the business model that this is something that is going to work. And they're playing in spaces like ghost kitchens that haven't worked for a lot of people. And so we see a proven entity like Mark Lore, people are willing to back, and all these acquisitions that they've made like Grubhub, those are household names. It gives people a little bit of confidence that they're going to be able to pull off something pretty big. Another data point that you can use between Blue Apron and Grubhub, you see what someone's ordering when they're using a restaurant occasion. You're seeing what someone's ordering when they're cooking from home. What can you learn from those two things to better your offerings or better target that person for future dining occasions across their portfolio? I think it's super, super interesting in a space I'm watching closely.
Alayna, thank you for joining me on the show today. It's always great to be able to get your take. I'd love for you to tell the listeners a bit more about you. I'll tell you one thing I'm going to say. is that Alayna wears the best shoes at conferences. My goodness, she was at this, where was the place on Monday evening last week? We were at Bruno Mars's nightclub.
Ring.
Yeah, there we go. And my goodness, she fit the place, right? With those kind of shoes, you really stood out.
You got to dress for the occasion.
Yeah, as a man who loves his shoes, I have to say, good job. But tell us about yourself. How long have you been with Olo, and what's the latest with the company?
Yeah, so been with Olo for 4.5 years, just before they became public. So been here predominantly for the public company journey, seen us go from what we call modules 3, where it's our direct ordering, first party delivery, third party delivery, to now over 16, which encompasses payments both on and off premise. I feel like the mission has gotten very crystal clear over the past few years, which is hospitality at scale. And I think it's, how do you make every guest feel like a regular, because you have all this digital data, because Olo has this massive footprint across 750 brands, 88,000 locations. How do you use all that to make someone who's maybe never set foot in your restaurant or never visited your website feel like you already know them if they've opted in? For me, as someone who enjoys the Shopify experience with Shop Pay, like, I love being able to log on to some place I've never been, and they have all my information. They make it very seamless. I was trying to do that for restaurants, but in a very restaurant targeted way that really plays on the hospitality that everyone knows and loves about the space.
Awesome. If people want to reach out, what's the best way to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Alayna Sullivan. I'm pretty active there. I'll respond to your DMs. And if you want to learn about Olo, visit olo.com. There's a lot of great content that the team works on, fun videos, case studies to see if you're looking on how you can use digital to grow hospitality, increase profitable traffic. Some brands doing really cool stuff. Case studies are right there for you to check out.
Yeah, and of course, if you want to learn a bit more about the story of how Olo came to be, then get your copy of Delivering the Digital Restaurant. Noah's in there.
Might be featured. You never know.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Alayna, for joining me today on the show. We had a lot to cover. Really appreciate all your insights. Good luck. Look forward to seeing you at the next show. And if you have any questions for us, then please put them in the comments below. We'd love to get back to you. But until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.